The Democrats of the House Oversight Committee today released 68 new photos, and these are absolutely insane photos, so we're going to go through them one by one. The first batch here are architectural diagrams drafted by a company based in the Virgin Islands, and we can actually see on the right-hand side here that it says Little St. James, U.S. Virgin Islands. This, of course, would be Jeffrey Epstein's infamous island. I'm curious why they chose to include these diagrams in this release here, because the diagrams only depict these two structures built on either side of a dock on the western side of the island. What's more interesting is this document, which details Jeffrey Epstein's plans for Great St. James, which is the island that is larger than Little St. James, obviously, and sits sort of to the northwest of it. We can see on the right-hand side here that there are plans for a cabana/tiki bar, an 80-foot tall flagpole, and a massive 60 by 100 pre-engineered storage building. Beneath that are a pool house, a tent, something I can't read there, a heli house, presumably near a helipad, a guest house, office, another house, and a word on the bottom there that I can't quite make out, maybe observatory. If you can make that out, let me know in the comments. The next photo appears to be the interior of Jeffrey Epstein's famous temple. We saw other photos of the interior in the previous drop, which we can see here on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. The top right depicting that strange celestial-themed scene, and the bottom right is a screenshot of a famous drone video taken by an unnamed person by the name of Rusty Shackelford. For many years, that was the only glimpse at the inside of this strange temple, which was the fixation of interest for most people when it came to Jeffrey Epstein's island, and now we can see that the same two mattresses are on display in this photo. This photo depicts a structure that previously we hadn't been able to see really into. It's a gigantic green structure buried amid various palm trees and things like that, and it looks to be some sort of a warehouse. There's maybe a workshop there on the right, as well as a storage area that's accessible to industrial vehicles, trucks, and forklifts and whatnot. If you watch my previous video, you'll recognize this setting almost immediately. This is the sterile kitchen that is almost uncharacteristic of Jeffrey Epstein, and we can see blacked out on the left-hand side there. If you'll remember, there was a photo of a naked infant playing in a sink. It's not clear whose child that was, but as we'll see later, that photo was not always there. We'll come back to that in a moment. This bathroom appears to be the same one that we talked about in the previous video, belonging to a little pool house building on the western side of the island. I'm not sure what the significance of this particular photo is, but we can see that two of the nude portraits on the left and right-hand side are blacked out. This photo shows Jeffrey Epstein standing next to Miroslav Lajčák, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovakia. It's too much to go into right now, but Jeffrey Epstein has been revealed to have had extensive ties to politicians in Eastern Europe, and he even had acquaintances who clued him in on things like real estate deals in Russia. The other notable thing about this, besides Jeffrey Epstein's just general slovenly appearance, which we can see throughout so many photos in this collection, are the fact that his pants are embroidered with the name Zorro, which is a clear reference to his Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. Speaking of slovenly, here's Jeffrey Epstein in sweatpants arriving at what looks to be some sort of airport and shaking hands with an official who, judging by the emblem on his left shoulder, looks to be from the Department of Homeland Security. Now, I was puzzled by the significance of this photo, as well as why Jeffrey Epstein would be shaking hands with such a person. You know, generally when you go through the airport, it's sort of a hostile experience. It's definitely not one where you're shaking hands with TSA agents or immigration officials. And we can see on the right-hand side here that there's a official portrait hung up on the wall. And I was able to match that with this official portrait of Kirsten Nielsen, who was the director of Homeland Security from December 6th, 2017 to April 10th, 2019. So that means that this photo would have been taken some point between those two dates, and it's interesting not only just because he's shaking hands with this person, but also that they appear to be taking a photo together and that someone is taking a photo of them taking a photo. It's just a bizarre situation from every angle. This photo shows Jeffrey Epstein having dinner with a man who I was not able to find out who he was. He's probably of Middle Eastern origin, and the following photos will show that Jeffrey Epstein had extensive contacts in that area, but I wasn't able to find out exactly who this person was or where the photo was taken. The next photo illustrates a little piece of knowledge that is useful for any time you're looking through these Jeffrey Epstein photos. Anytime you see those leopard print chairs, the photo was taken in New York City. The left-hand side of the photo depicts David Blaine, that famous magician, and he's doing card tricks for Thomas Pritzker, who is one of the most notable members of the Pritzker family, one of the United States' most wealthy families. They're sort of hotel chain magnates, and they also have holdings in a lot of different areas as well. To the right of him is Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel, and to the right of Ehud Barak, as we're looking at him, is Woody Allen, the famous film director. The next photos show Jeffrey Epstein speaking with Steve Bannon, who at the time was a close advisor to Donald Trump and is quickly becoming one of the most important figures in understanding Jeffrey Epstein's late life. Steve Bannon is in possession of hours and hours and hours of interviews and footage of Jeffrey Epstein that he was going to use for an unreleased documentary about him. And in case you needed further proof that Jeffrey Epstein was a narcissist and an egomaniac, we can see on the right-hand side of this executive desk that he has that Jeffrey Epstein has a full-size photo of himself, sort of a headshot, framed and facing outward for everyone to see. In this photo, Jeffrey Epstein speaks with Sheikh Jabor bin Youssef bin Yassim bin Jabor Al Thani, who is a prominent Qatari businessman involved in everything from insurance to the energy industry. He's been mentioned several times in Jeffrey Epstein's emails, mostly by the sort of nickname Jabor Y. This is a photo of Jeffrey Epstein and someone who I was not able to identify in Jeffrey Epstein's house, and Epstein looks to be wearing what's called a bisht, which is a traditional Arabic, specifically Saudi Arabian, piece of clothing. Coming back now to Jeffrey Epstein's very sterile island kitchen, this is Sultan Ahmed bin Salayem. He's one of the most prominent connections that Jeffrey Epstein has in the Middle East, specifically in the Gulf. Salayem is the CEO of one of the world's largest shipping and logistics companies. It's called DP World. But we can also see in the right-hand side there that photo that we talked about earlier of the naked infant swimming in the sink is not there. It looks to be a painting in some sort of gilded frame. Jeffrey Epstein sits next to a girl or woman with her face redacted in this photo, taking some sort of air transportation, possibly a helicopter or plane. And one thing that's kind of interesting about this photo is that he has a bandage on the right arm, typically where you might do a blood draw or something like that. So I wonder if he was undergoing some sort of medical treatment at this point in time. Here's Jeffrey Epstein with bin Salayem, the man that we just spoke about, standing in front of a chalkboard with calculations that I'm way too dumb to know anything about. If you're a mathematician or a scientist of any kind and can clue me in on what these calculations are meant to represent, please do in the comments. I can see to the left side of Jeffrey Epstein the word DNA, but that's about all that I can do. Here's a gross photo of Jeffrey Epstein with 3 different girls around him seated in his New York City townhome. One of them has her arms wrapped around him. One of them is looking at something on the computer, and the other is being assisted by Jeffrey Epstein in putting her watch on. The thing about this photo that immediately piqued my interest is not the women, it's that creepy photo on the wall there. And I looked it up, and it actually belongs to the steeplechase in Coney Island, where Jeffrey Epstein is from, so it's probably a nod to his childhood. However, it is quite creepy. Jeffrey Epstein hosted some sort of meeting of the minds between his different scientist friends. The one is Mikhail Gromov, who is a scientist, mathematician. The other is Seth Lloyd, who is a mechanical engineer at MIT. In the middle is Martin Novak, who is an evolutionary biologist at Harvard. He's still there. However, he has extensive ties to Jeffrey Epstein that have been proven over and over again. And on the right-hand side, kind of looking down possibly at his phone, is bin Salayem again. We get another angle of this meeting. I'm not sure where it took place. It looks like it could be some sort of faculty lounge or university setting. And some people have speculated in this final photo that the person sitting to the left of Jeffrey Epstein is Peter Thiel. However, I don't believe that to be the case. I think it could be Joshua Bach, who we spoke about in a previous episode. He had some very strange ideas about exterminating certain types of people, the ill and the elderly, for example, but I can't say for certain that that is him. The next file is a photo of an inmate request from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. This would have been during the time that Jeffrey Epstein was imprisoned, that so-called sweetheart deal down in Florida. I'm not sure what to make of this particular inmate request form. It says on the bottom here, although I'm not sure who wrote it and I can't make out every word, but it says, "I wanted you to know something, 817, pulling you by the hand, learning to drive, GED, listening in the pink room, something and movie, made me say it and then didn't, Paris, Dubai, something blanked out," and then it says head on hand, and then a word I can't quite make out. On the right-hand side there, it says David Copperfield movie, and then on the bottom, the official response field, it says I love you. And then back up on the top, in the other field, it says love of my life. If you've been to prison and know what this kind of form is used for and have any theories about this, let me know. The next photo is of a prescription medication called phenazopyridine. I had to look this up. I'm not a doctor, but it says phenazopyridine is used to relieve the pain, burning, and discomfort caused by infection or irritation of the urinary tract. It's not 100% certain to me that this is for Jeffrey Epstein, but on the left-hand side of the bottle there, we can see that it says 301 East 66th Street, which is a building that is owned by Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, and in which Jeffrey Epstein rented multiple units. This is a photo of two compound bows. I'm not sure whose they were or what the significance of them is. The following photos are from a billionaire's dinner attended by Jeffrey Epstein, and the photos have been previously released, but a lot of people didn't know about them because they're only on an archived website on edge.org, and you can look into that if you want to see the original photos. The conference was attended by very influential people such as Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, but in these photos released as part of this tranche of documents, we can see David Brooks, who is a New York Times columnist, and actually who recently wrote a piece arguing that the Jeffrey Epstein files are not interesting and that America should basically not pay any attention to it and that it's a big spectacle. So his inclusion in these documents is quite interesting. We can also see Sergey Brin, who is one of the co-founders of Google. Here he is smiling wide with several bits of whatever he was eating in his teeth. This man is Salar Kamangar. He was the CEO of YouTube at the time. Here's Jeffrey Epstein giving new meaning to the words too close for comfort. Here's David Brooks again. Here's a photo of Jeffrey Epstein and Woody Allen, probably taken outside of Jeffrey Epstein's townhome in New York City. Behind them, I wasn't sure exactly who this man was. I saw some people speculating that it was Dick Cavett, who was a former television host. And I don't want to say with 100% certainty that it was him. However, I googled Dick Cavett and Jeffrey Epstein, and it seems that Dick Cavett was penciled into Jeffrey Epstein's schedule at one time. And I also found this photo of him on the left-hand side here wearing a very similar cap. If you zoom in on both of them, they both have the same braided leather bit along the brim there. Here is Bill Gates and a woman whose face is redacted in some sort of a hotel room. Here is Bill Gates with a different woman who I have to say her body language looks incredibly uncomfortable. We can see in the glass-paned doors in the back that it says Signature Flight Support. Signature Aviation is obviously an aviation company, and Bill Gates, interestingly, in 2021, made a move with Blackstone and another hedge fund to acquire Signature. I'm not exactly sure where this photo was taken. Signature does have a presence in the airports both at Palm Beach and Newark Airport, which Jeffrey Epstein frequently flew into whenever he wanted to get to New York City. But it could be a different one, I'm not quite sure. Here's Jeffrey Epstein with Noam Chomsky, the left-leaning philosopher and thinker. And some of the final photos in this batch of documents are photos taken of passports and various forms of identification belonging to women. This first one is an ID of a woman. We can see the F there under the sex field, from the Republic of Lithuania, but everything else is blacked out. The next two are from women from Ukraine. After that, there's an ID from someone from South Africa, and that is also a woman. Here we have a passport from someone from Ukraine, as well as one from a woman from the Czech Republic. This is an Italian ID, and we can see under the field 4C that MC means that the person concerned is from Macerata, which is in the middle of Italy, central Italy. This visa comes from Morocco. This photo appears to be one of Jeffrey Epstein's personal passport. It says the bearer was convicted of a offense against a minor and is a convicted offender. This photo is of a woman's passport from Russia, and this one is of Jeffrey Epstein's personal passport. Now we get into really some of the grossest photos, the most shocking ones of this collection here. This appears to be of a woman's back, and on it is written, "She was Dolores on the dotted line," which is a quote from the book Lolita, that infamous, very controversial book about a pedophile. And Jeffrey Epstein, interestingly, as we just learned this year, owned a first edition copy of that book. There are quotes from this book written all over this woman's body, whoever she is. It says, "She was Dolly at school" in this photo. In the next one, it says, "She was Lola in slacks." In the next one, which is written on the woman's foot, and we can actually see the copy of Lolita in the back, it says, "She was low, playing low in the morning, standing 4'10" in one sock." So really just depicting this girl as a child. And the person who wrote this relishing in this depiction. It's really almost beyond belief and sickening. Written on this woman's chest is the beginning of that book. It's quite a famous beginning. It says, "Lolita, the tip of the tongue taking a trip of 3 steps down the palate to tap at 3 on the teeth." And as if that wasn't disturbing enough, we have a screenshot of someone's phone. I can't tell if maybe it's Telegram or WhatsApp, but whatever the case, it says, "I don't know, try to send someone else. I have a friend, Scout. She sent me some girls today, but she asks $1,000 per girl. I will send you girls now. Maybe someone will be good for Jay," probably Jeffrey. And then it says name, blanked out, 18 years old, something else that's blanked out, height blanked out, measurements blanked out, weight blanked out in kilograms. And here's something wild. That next word, Schengen, with the check mark next to it, I believe refers to the European system by which you can travel between certain states without border checks or various identification checks. This appears to be some sort of trafficking, and on the bottom it says departure city, something in Russia. It feels as though this year, 2025, has been one of the most explosive years in the Jeffrey Epstein saga. Despite his best efforts to the contrary, to conduct his activities in secrecy, it seems as though we've learned more about this man in the last 12 months than we have at any point since Jeffrey Epstein died. I'm hopeful that the forthcoming release of the so-called Epstein files gives us much more information on who Jeffrey Epstein was acquainted with, who he was working with, and what he was doing, so that the victims, the countless women who were impacted by his actions, can actually see some sort of justice done, even though Jeffrey Epstein will never face the consequences of his actions. I thank you very much for watching. When those files drop, if they drop, I'll be here reading all of them and presenting it to you the best I can. Thank you.